Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 60 of A Yank on the Footy. I'm Craig Wessels from Sandusky, Ohio, and I'm glad that you're listening. This episode is the second of several unique episodes that I'm releasing over the coming weeks. As I'm drawing closer to the one-year anniversary of the starting of my podcast at the end of December, I wanted to take a look at what the pulse is of supporters around Australia and around the world as far as how they believe their clubs have done during the trade period. So over the last several days, and last week or so, I've conducted closing in on a dozen interviews now with supporters of all sorts of different clubs. And in this episode, I'm going to be sitting down to talk with Michael Livingston, who's a longtime Swans supporter, and Sharn Sawers, who is a Magpies supporter. Great conversations with both of these gentlemen. Now, Sharn had a rather unique take on things because, let's be honest, many people, after they saw what the Magpies had done during the trade period, it was very doom and gloom. But Sharn has a completely different take on what the Pies did during the trade period, and he laid out a rather good argument as to why the Stevenson and Treloar trades were actually good deals for the Pies going forward. So sit back and relax and enjoy my discussions with Michael and Sharn. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is a Swan supporter, and he previously worked as an umpire in footy for a decade, and that's something that I'm hoping that he and I can sit down and explore a little bit more deeply in the future. I'd like to welcome Michael Livingston to the podcast. Michael, welcome. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, Craig. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate it. It was I'm glad that you reached out. This has been a fun adventure these last few days, just getting these organized, because I have a couple interviews that I'm doing at 5:30 in the morning in the coming days. So, you're a Swan supporter, and how are you from the Sydney area?
Originally, I'm actually from Melbourne. So,
okay.
And people don't actually know this, but the Swans themselves weren't actually from Sydney originally. They were actually from South Melbourne. So, and they were there for just over 108 years. And then in 1982, they moved over to Sydney after suffering some financial problems, and they've been there ever since. And as to how I became involved with them, my family has been following the Swans since the 1930s.
Oh,
so
wow.
It's a really big family thing. So
okay. So you are a blood through and through.
I love it that you actually put that up, because most people don't actually know that little nickname. People associate with the culture that we have, and the fact that you pull it up and say you're a blood supporter, I think that's great. I'm surprised you're not one yourself, given you're a Cats fan.
Well, yeah, that's it took me a while to figure out which team I wanted to support, and when I finally did, now that the player that drove me to doing that is now playing for Brisbane, so he just moved over this year. So, do you find yourself do you get the opportunity to go to a lot of games they play at the SCG, right? Or yeah,
and they play at the SCG,
okay.
And they also play at
the showground.
A couple of other stadiums, including the MCG, Etihad, or sorry, actually saying Marvel Stadium as it is called now,
mm-hmm.
and a variety of other stadiums around the country. So a lot of the times, if I see matches, not going to be in Sydney, they'll be down in Melbourne, and they play around 8 matches in Melbourne a year.
Right.
So I'm always going out and watching matches there. If I get an opportunity to go up to Sydney sometime soon, I'll go up and watch them there. So
okay,
that's sort of once in a lifetime opportunity, though.
Okay, so the trade period has come and gone last week, and City didn't make a whole lot of moves. But what are the first words that kind of come to your mind at the end of the trade period about how they did?
Well, to be honest, in terms of this current trade period, I openly feel that the Swans were too quiet. Keep in mind, after the season was over, there were 3 areas that they had to target in order to improve the playing list and get the team ready for the next season, and they haven't actually addressed that yet. Those being, they needed a ruck, they needed a key forward to help out Lance Franklin and Sam Reid, and they needed a key back, because right now, in terms of backmen, we are undersized compared to most of the clubs. So they made only one move, and that was to get Tom Hickey. I would say an okay ruckman, but not the one I would have definitely chosen for. As I would have said, let's go harder for someone like a Braden Pruce, who went to GWS, or let's push Port Adelaide a little harder and get Peter Ladhams. Sorry, but yeah, like if they would have gone for someone like that, I would have been a lot happier with it. But I'm not exactly sure how Tom Hickey is going to fit into the mix because he's throughout his entire career he's been a backup ruckman to guys like Nat Nui and Vardy over at West Coast, and it's just very hard to understand as to how he's going to fit.
Okay. And, that was, you mentioned about the size with the ruck and that sort of thing. That was, I probably watched a dozen of the Swans games this year. And that one of the things they talked about is that because they were decimated by injuries this year, they had a lot of people hurt. And it looked as though all of their talls were injured. That, that you didn't, you were had a hard time finding anybody that was over about 185 centimeters tall to play.
Yeah. It's a real trouble with football. Like most times, you want to have a couple of guys who are around that size, and when you're decimated by injury continuously, you're fighting more of a David and Goliath battle each and every week, and that's a real challenge, especially in the way the game's played right now. Having that kind of height available is a massive asset, and when you lose it, you lose a lot of the necessary capability to be able to play well. Like we look at Geelong, look at Richmond. You notice how many talls do they have on their list at the moment and how many of them were able to perform consistently. When you take the talls away from a team, they lose out because then they have to rely on the mistakes made by the opponents to get back into it. And that's a real problem.
Right. That's a great point. Yeah. When you're at the center bounce, you just, or the ball in, you're struggling to get your hands on it because their guy's not really having to compete that hard for us. You don't have anybody to really battle with them.
Absolutely.
So go ahead.
Yeah, it's becoming a scrap when that happens, and that's when games either get won or lost based on what the midfielders end up doing. And if the ruck is not, if the ruck battle isn't balanced, then that opposition's going to win every single time because it wouldn't work. And I've seen thousands of games where the rucks were undersized or out of position or weren't in form going against guys who knew what they were doing, and they just lost it every single time.
Now you had to be pleased though. Even though they had a ton of injuries, they did not stop competing. That club played hard all year, and they won games that maybe some people. Yeah,
they did definitely play hard, and I think that's a big testament to what the Swans actually are. Since 2003, the Swans have been continuously ridiculed for their ability to fight hard, particularly in close games. And this is just a testament to their character over the last 17 years, where they only missed finals on 4 occasions, and have still managed to come back and play consistently for it. So the fact that they always fight hard is the thing that I'm always going to respect about them. So this year wasn't really our year. COVID and all these other injuries kind of played a part in that. But
right.
I'm really happy with the way they went about it. There were a lot of close games they could have potentially have won, but it just wasn't in their favor.
And that in and of itself, I think, is a learning experience for them going forward.
Absolutely,
because you had a season where you played the season without arguably the best goal kicker of this generation, and they had to figure out how else are we going to score.
And that's the thing, really, because a lot of clubs place a lot of value on their big key forwards, and they don't give as much value to the small forwards. And this year, we were forced to do that without Buddy. So we had to rely on a lot of small forwards to kind of do the work for us. Guys like Will Hayward, Tom Papley, Louis Taylor, even a young debutant by the name of Sam Wicks was really big for us in that respect. So small forwards don't always get the kudos that they get. There are 1 or 2 exceptions to that, though, being like an Eddie Betts or Charlie Cameron. So there is people don't really understand how much value they kind of add to the team. And this year, the Swans kind of did that without Tall. So they put a lot of value in the fact that they had essentially a mosquito fleet to kind of play their games. And that was a real testament, despite how everything went down.
So do you think he was out all of last year? Do you think Buddy has much left in the tank?
Look, and I tell this to a lot of people who ask me about why on earth would we sign Buddy in the first place. Now, I'll admit in the beginning, Buddy was signed to a big contract that was very, very questionable. 9-year deal on $10
Wow.
million. You would never see that in any other player. The only player who would ever come close to that would be a Jordan De Goey, a Dusty Martin, or even a Patrick Dangerfield for that matter. You would never see any other player come close to that. And from the very start, everyone's had questions over the fact that he'll be able to play to the end of this contract. Given the fact that he's 7 years in, I think he's still got enough to go into the very end of the deal.
Okay.
There's only been one other player who's played longer than that, and that was a guy from Brisbane by the name of Alistair Lynch, and he was signed on a 10-year deal.
Mm-hmm.
So when people say to me, he's not going to play the end of it, he's going to retire a year early, or an injury's going to take him out, I say, you don't know what's going to happen next. The man is getting older. Yes, there are some injuries that are creeping up on him, but when he gets out in the park, he busts his butt and he plays well. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. If you said that about a Tom Hawkins or even a Tom Lynch, you wouldn't get the same response because they're on deals that are significantly shorter.
Right,
So,
right.
No one kind of puts that real pressure on it.
Yeah, so I think, if he comes back in, I think that's going to be a significant help because, he still is going to draw, a second defender that's going to be looking at him all the time, which is going to help open up the ground to those small forwards who got a lot more experience this year because he wasn't there.
That's the thing I like to point out too, because people don't realize the kind of impact that Buddy has, particularly on a club. And when you say he brings a second defender with him, that's a massive help to a lot of players who would feel completely outnumbered in the face of an absolute challenge. And I also had to go back to what I said in the other trade period. They were looking for a key forward to help him because when there's no second key forward to kind of help Buddy out, it's an absolute challenge to get the ball to him under any circumstance. And it's the same with the small forwards too.
Right, exactly.
So, and there was an instance where this was really highlighted too. Between 2013 to 2017, the Swans had Kurt Tippett and Buddy Franklin on the forward line, and there was no way you couldn't get Buddy Franklin with a one-on-one. He was able to get that most of the time, and he was at a dime because he had that second tall there to kind of help him out.
Right.
So having a second tall there to help him really pushes the agenda so that he can still play well.
Yeah, I think that's what Geelong is hoping to do this year with bringing in Jeremy Cameron to an extent, being able to take, compel other clubs to say, okay, which guy are you going to pay attention to?
Yeah, that's the real challenge when you have two key power forwards.
Yeah.
The Swans did it for 4 or 5 years between Buddy and Tippett, and then later Buddy and Reid. So people don't, and even Richmond's done it as well with Jack Riewoldt and Tom Lynch.
That's who I was just going to bring them up. Yeah.
So yeah, it's incredibly big to have that second forward there because when that second forward's not there, it just makes it all the more harder for them to get in the game.
Right. And it opens things up. You look at what Richmond did in the grand final. It opens things up for Dusty.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
When you have that kind of focus down there, no one's going to worry about a midfielder who kind of ghosts in every now and then. It takes all the pressure off him to say, okay, no one's going to be harassing me or whatever like a suit. I'll go in there, I'll make an impact, and they aren't going to be able to stop it because they've got too many other things to handle.
Exactly. Now, I had a couple other things I wanted to ask you. Are there any players that are out there that were delisted that you think could come in and help the Swans that didn't get signed as free agents during the trade period that could possibly come on board?
Funny you should mention that. There are actually 2 names that have popped up on my agenda in the last couple of weeks. The first one from the North Melbourne Football Club, who was recently delisted, that was Majak Daw. Being a ruckman, I think he'd be a great help if he was to be signed by the Swans. But of course, they need to work on his attitude because apparently his attitude was not that great. He was considered a lazy footballer. So
Okay.
there's a bit of a risk there. And the other one, which I didn't expect at all, was Paddy McCartan, who was originally
Okay.
St Kilda.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to.
Because his brother's currently playing with us at the moment too. So
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. And that may be a good draw to get him there, to have that
and the
opportunity
only
to do
reason
that.
why he was out as well was because of multiple concussions.
Right. Right.
And finally been given the chance to play again. So
Yeah.
in my opinion, if he does come back, he won't go to his own club. He'll come to the Swans instead because he wasn't part of his brother.
Right. Yeah. One that I've been thinking about, and he's not a tremendous player, and he got zero opportunity this year. And he was with the Cats for a few years. Was Wiley Buzza, who was kind of a key forward ruck with the Cats. He went to Port last year. I don't think he played a single game with them last year, but he's I think he's close to 200 centimeters, if not a little more than that. Really wiry, curly hair. Didn't know if he'd be somebody that could possibly help them out in the ruck as well.
Well, there's a possibility there. Like, there's no reason why they couldn't give him a shot.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they have to consider, is he battle tested enough to kind of take
That's a good point.
Because a lot of people have different beliefs with this, but in my opinion, if you're going to take on a player, he has to have at least debuted, and he has to be battle tested, because there's no point taking on a fresh player if they aren't going to be willing to take on the responsibility.
That's a good point. Yeah, I'm not even positive on when this happens. In terms of the time frame where the delisted players are eligible to be signed, does that happen before or after the draft?
That happens in the period leading up to the draft.
Okay.
And afterwards, so because the draft is only run on one specific over 2 specific days.
Right.
And going into that period and going out of it, that's when the whole delisted free agency kind of happens.
Okay.
Where players can be signed on again.
Now, you guys have pick 3, which might end up getting pushed to pick 4, depending on what the Bulldogs do with. They've got I think it's a father-son or an academy player that they're looking to add at the number 1 spot. That's why they went out and picked up the points that they did to go get him. He has a hyphenated name. I can't remember his name right now, but what are you looking for the club to be getting with that early pick? What are your thoughts?
In terms of that number 3 pick, I think that the club is really set on either 1 or 2 specific players, and they're actually from the Swans Academy. So
okay.
There are 2. Usually now, every year, there's usually 2 or 3 players who come up in consideration for being top 10 picks or something close to that within the Swans Academy system. So generally, right now, we're trying to build a list that's primarily based around these academy players, because for years the Swans have had problems with player retention. So by getting kids out of, say, Victoria or Western Australia or in Queensland, it's very hard to hold on to them after their 2 years are up. So and they all want to go home and play for their home states. So by building a list that's created with the academy players, it gives more security to them to know, okay, these guys aren't just going to walk out on us after 2 years.
Right.
They'll actually get a chance here to really develop and make this club their own.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. And that's something I want to explore with people down the road and ask them about, because the homesickness thing, if you want to call it that, or wanting to play with your home. Yeah, that's something that it doesn't happen as often in, say, the NFL, that type of thing. Of course, the contract, those initial contracts are longer. So it's always one of those things that I wonder, what if the Players Association, agreed to, or the league agreed to them having them play be compelled to sign a longer initial contract that would keep them there for 3 years or something of that nature, that would maybe help them to develop that appreciation for the club that they ended up going to.
I think that is a possibility, but at the same time, you can't put ease of mind on a player who's just coming into the system. Let's say they were in for 5-10 years and they were asked to move away from their home state. I think they'd be okay with that. But for a young kid coming in, there is an element of homesickness to it. and I've actually witnessed it with a couple of people. In fact, I'm thinking of a recent player who played in the grand final, matter of fact, for Geelong, Gary Rowan.
Mm-hmm.
He was originally with the Swans before he
Right.
went to Geelong, and he expressed at the time when he wanted to leave that he was a bit homesick because he wanted to go back to Victoria to kind of just be around family. At the time, he'd lost his one of his daughters to a rare illness. So,
I
and there
didn't
were other
know
things
that.
at the same time. So, there is a necessity for the homesickness factor because when a player has to move from a home state into a new club, it's a massive foreign environment. And
Yeah.
imagine a kid who's just turned 18 and they have to move out of home into an entirely new environment. How are they going to cope?
That's fair. That's a fair point. Yeah.
It takes a long time for them to be able to adapt and kind of get used to it. And they know within 1 or 2 years if it's really the place for them to really be. So that's kind of why the contracts are usually around 1 to 2 years at most.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. That makes sense. So the last thing I wanted to ask you about, and it's really not footy related, but it's definitely Swan related. What do you think of the new logo?
I think the logo is a good improvement on what was originally there. Keep in mind that old logo was there since the mid-90s when they were really, really struggling. That's been a real symbol for a lot of the fans to kind of get around. But for me, looking at this new logo, it looks great. I'm not taking anything away from the designers who made it, but it still feels a little incomplete.
Okay.
Now, the reason why I say that is because they could have gone back and taken anything from some of the older logos that the clubs had over the years and put that in, and that would have made it completely whole. But in my opinion, if they wanted to make it complete, they would have added in the club's motto from long before they moved to Sydney. And it actually is a very, very powerful motto as well. So,
What is that motto? I'm not familiar with that.
the original motto for the Swans in Latin was "Aut vincere, aut more," which translated to English means to conquer or to die. So,
Wow.
and that's been an epitome of their character from the time they started till the time they had to move away from Melbourne. So, I figure if they were to incorporate that in the logo, it'd be a massive plus, and it wouldn't just signify the Melbourne roots, but it would also say, yes, we are an aggressive, hard nut club, and we have the motto to say we will not go down without a fight.
Okay. Cool. That's that. I like that. I like adding that on there. That would be a great addition. Is that
And
something, maybe that could become part of like one of the alternative, jerseys, not necessarily the one that's for the indigenous round, but something that they could wear as an extra one then.
the jerseys are a bit of a mixed bag for me because with the Swans logo that's been around for 20 odd years, everyone's kind of used to that one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the one that everyone really wants to go towards now is the original South Melbourne version, which was the white, the plain white with the red V. And that's a really famous jumper for us. So I feel that if they really wanted to make it, they wanted to take it back to like a heritage round or something like that, they would use that kind of jumper.
So it kind of looked a little bit like the almost like the jersey they wore in like the State of Origin game for Victoria, that kind of thing.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And the bit of a reason behind it is because the V is for Victoria, and that's a big symbol for Victorians. So you probably find it on Google or something like that. There's been different variations of it over time. Even when they first started, it was red and white hoops, and then it changed to a red sash, and they changed to a red V. And then when they moved away to Sydney, it became the white with the Opera House silhouette.
Right, right. Now, did the reason they changed the Opera House thing? I thought I read that the Opera House wanted to get paid for having that logo on, having that image on the jerseys.
I'm not exactly sure of the exact details, but one side of it was that the Opera House was trying to charge $50,000 a year in licensing fees for using the silhouette.
Okay.
And it's funny too because they actually got another sporting club in Australia, the Sydney Kings basketball team, on that too, and they got rid of it.
Okay.
To me, it was it was an unnecessary cash grab, which has basically backfired in their faces, because there was no point to ask for that kind of money for a symbol which has been on a jersey for more than 20 odd years.
Right.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, I'm looking at the old jerseys with the red V on there. Do you worry though about the people in New South Wales saying, why are we putting the V for Victoria on the jerseys of our club if they're playing here?
It's a bit of a mixed bag. Like,
Okay.
I understand there's a lot of different views, particularly on the fans, whether they come from Victoria or from New South Wales, because a lot of the Swans history was based in Victoria, so that's why they have the V at all, and that's why it's in the logo. And we don't usually see the V jersey around as much anyway. It's used more for like a heritage purpose. If anything.
Okay.
So there shouldn't really be that much of a problem. I think it just, in my opinion, they should be using the red V more as like an away jersey or something like that. Like the home jersey is fine as it is, but just bring out the V for the away jersey, because it looks so much more phenomenal as opposed to what the away strip kind of looks like.
Yeah, I'm looking at one that has the swan with the wings all up, and it has the Latin phrase underneath it, kind of on a little sash underneath it.
That's the original logo from the 30s, which I really think they could have used.
Yeah, that looks sharp. That's a nice. I like that one. That's something. I think they could have gone with that. But the
logo's evolved a lot over the years, and that original one from the 30s was kind of like the cat cry to what the club was at the time. So as to where it is now, it's evolved, but I think it's really kind of gone back to where it really needs to be.
Cool.
Because some of the later logos, when you look at them, they kind of seem, they've lost their kind of aggressiveness.
Yeah.
So when I
looking at one that has it's a South Melbourne one, and it has the VFL logo on it, and it's got the swan kind of with the teeth opened up on the side. That's
a great logo.
Yeah, that's kind of cool too. Well, hey, Robert or Michael, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm thinking Robert Louis Stephen. I don't know. It's after midnight here. It's Michael. I appreciate you. Fitting me into your schedule today and coming on and talking about the Swans and talking about the trade period. I really appreciate you taking time. I hope to be able to have you come back on and talk about umpiring, because I think that's a fascinating topic that I really want to explore and learn. What is a held ball?
Trust me. If we go on into umpiring, I'll be talking to you for hours on end. So
sounds good.
You'll have plenty to hear from me on that.
That sounds great. So again, my guest was Michael Livingston, big Swan supporter. And Michael, again, I appreciate you taking time out of your day, and thanks so very much. And wish the Swans best of luck.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having me on the show.
You bet. I appreciate it. Thanks, sir. All right, ladies and gentlemen, my next guest is coming to us from Brisbane, but he's not a Lion supporter. He is a Magpie supporter, and based upon the discussions that we had over the last couple of days, he has a slightly different approach or take on the Pies moves. I'd like to welcome Sharn Sawers to the podcast. Sharn, thanks for coming on. Thanks for reaching out. I appreciate it.
No problem, mate.
This has been a bit of a crazy trade period, a huge flurry of moves that happened, especially at the end, and they all seem to be focused on the club in black and white.
Yeah, nothing unusual there.
So there were a lot of moves, and they have definitely made headlines throughout the footy world with what the Magpies have done. They shipped out Jaden Stevenson, they shipped out Adam Treloar, and Tom Phillips as well, and another young man who's it's way too early in the morning for me to be pronouncing his name. Bozen.
I just call him R2.
There you go. I'm glad you said it. But were you when the trade period ended and you saw and everything came out, because if I'm not mistaken, the
the Stevenson and Treloar deals came right at the end. What were your thoughts as this transpired?
Well, initially when I first heard about it, the rumours, I was actually kind of keen to actually trade out Treloar. As much as I love the player, I love him as a person. I've met him before, and he's an absolutely fantastic bloke. But realistically, I've expected more, and I'll go into that a bit more. But at the end, when I sort of thought it wasn't going to get done, and I was like, wow, okay, so maybe Stevenson's going to be the only big one sort of going, like apart from Phillips, I guess. But yeah, I was a bit just, geez, it doesn't seem like it's going to go through. And then when I heard it did go through, my initial thought was, wow, we didn't get as much as what I wanted to go and get for him. But having said that, it is an unusual situation, and I guess other clubs got wind on, what Collingwood's trying to do, and we didn't really have much leverage to bargain with, really.
Yeah, because this was, whether they want to admit it or not, they were kind of up against the salary cap, and they needed to clear out some space. It's kind of what it looks like that's come out through the news media and such, and a lot of people have talked about that.
I definitely think the salary cap's definitely a major factor in it all, and for me, it all goes back to 2018, when we were like a whisker away from winning the grand final, and I guess Collingwood's perspective at the time was, well, if we can bring in Dane Beams, he can be the icing on the cake that'll get us there, but it didn't really work out that way.
Yeah, it's. Do you think looking back at it, do you think that the Grundy deal was too large of a contract for them? I mean, that's not one that I had really thought about before, but I know some folks have said that's one that they're paying a significant amount of money on, and again, you have to factor in the fact that nobody could have anticipated the pandemic having the impact on every club in the comp, and it certainly impacted the Magpies as severely as anybody else.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's like at the end of 2018 when we brought Beams in, we've pretty much gone right to the limit of our cap, and we've pretty much said, listen, we're really going for a flag in the next couple of years. We think we can get it. We've gone pretty much all in, and it really didn't work out well. And then, yeah, as you said, with COVID coming down this year, it's exacerbated it even more, really. So it was a matter of, do we have the players right now that we think that we can go and push for a premiership in the next year or two, or are we going to go and make the changes now that we're going to go and the tough calls? And
so,
yeah,
having made the moves that they did make, and the Treloar deal, it reminded me of something that happened here in the NFL. I don't know if you follow American football at all.
Yeah, yeah.
We had a situation about 4 years ago where the team in Houston had a player that they had signed to a very expensive contract, and it turned out he was a terrible player. So they were looking to get rid of his contract. So they traded him to Cleveland, and they said, Cleveland, you take on his contract, and we will give you a second-round pick to take his contract and give us a fourth-round pick back.
Yep.
So that to me, that's a lot what the Treloar pick looked like. That they had to basically, pay the Bulldogs to take on his contract, and got something back, but not a huge amount back.
Essentially, that's it, really. Like as I said before, I love Treloar. I think he's great, and he's the number one possession getter in the comp. Even this year, even though he'd only played like about 10 games this year, on aggregate, I think he still was the number one disposal winner for the year per game. But when you look a bit more into it, though, sure, he gets a lot of the ball, but his disposal efficiency is only around 60%. But then you look at his kicking, and it's under 50%. And so, more than half the time he kicks the ball, it's going to end up in the opposition, and that's pretty damaging.
That's a good point.
And there's a lot of other stats, like he's an attacking mid, yet only kicked one goal this year. His goal accuracy is only around 12%. So he's kicked one goal. I think I'm not too sure how many behinds he's kicked, but having said that, it has been an off year for everyone, and I was thinking the same with Steve-O. He's had a really bad year. It's just one of those funny years, but having said that as well, there's a lot of rumours going around. You never really know what's going on behind the scenes, but back to Treloar, I just think that, he's just not as damaging as what I really think that we could go and get. And I think at the end of 2018, we wanted to keep the team together. We thought just bringing Beams in, we could go and do that, but it just didn't work out, unfortunately, with Beams. And I think they've just made the tough call. And who can we sort of take out of the team to give us the cap space to be able to bring in a new free agent and to be able to, deal in trades, because we just haven't been able to do it in the last year or so because of how tight in the salary cap we are. So, and then on top of that, it's, he's got his injury concerns with his hamstrings, like 2 hamstring injuries at the same time in 2018. And then again this year, at the start of the year, he nicked another hammy, and then midway through the year, pulled the hammy again, and he was out for, I can't remember how many games, but going on the games just this year, he played about 10 games, and I think we won 5 and we lost 5 with him in the team, So it's, I think out of anyone who's making good money out of in Collingwood, he's one player that we could go and get rid of, that we can go and get someone that's just as good, if not better, that's younger, and possibly even at a cheaper price as well.
Well, and if I'm not mistaken, the way his contract was structured, his salary was only going to increase during the course of the contract, because if I'm not mistaken, they back-ended it.
Well, that's what it sounds like. I'm a little, it's all a bit of hearsay, really, with contracts. I'm sure people sort of get wind of it, but you hear a lot of different figures getting floated around, and who knows what the real story is. But it does sound like it would have been back-ended. Who knows around what price, but
now,
it just didn't work out in the end, and we had to make the tough call. Treloar, for me, was the right one to go and trade out, which is really sad, because he's a great player. He's a great bloke, and that's why Collingwood supporters are so upset. He loves the club. He's an absolute genuine bloke. He's a really nice guy, but like in AFL footy, it's a very emotional game, but you got to sort of hold those emotions back and think logically when you're dealing with trades and all that sort of stuff. The stuff behind the scenes. So tough calls, but I think they're the right ones, and we can really look ahead now. And I honestly think that Collingwood's got someone lined up, or they've as a free agent for next year. It also is going to go and give us an opportunity in this draft. And I know that the picks that we've got at the moment aren't that good, but I'm thinking what they're going to do is package up 14, 16, and next year's first, and to someone like North, and we'll go and get pick number 2. And then with, I think, McDonald's the one that I'm really looking at.
Okay, because I was going to ask you what you thought was going to happen with the draft and what they might be targeting, but that may not be such a bad move for either of them, because North they gutted their list. I think they delisted 11 players at the end of the season, right. So they're having to fill out a significant portion of their list.
That's right, exactly. So many people have damned me for it, going, no way North will accept that, But honestly, I think that, the one pick, sure, they can get a gun player, but they're after quite a few, So I think if we could give them 14, 16, and next year's first, which we don't really need, because Dacos is going to be coming through, possibly a top 3 pick. It'll be a waste. That pick will just go straight on Dacos, we can use later picks. So we may as well trade it out. And I don't think we're going to go and drop as much as some people are freaking out next year. A lot of people are sort of suggesting, don't trade next year's first. It could be turned into a top 5 pick anyway in itself. And I don't think that's the that's going to happen. Well, fingers crossed. But I think it's just a sensible move where we can go and get in, particularly if it's McDonald. Wow, that would be amazing. He's a mad Collingwood supporter as well, even though he lives in Perth. He's just the type of player that we need. But having said that, say, for instance, Adelaide picks him. There's some other great ones out there as well, like Hollands and Phillips, that are mids. Not necessarily a key position player, but, I think that with the retirement of Buckley, of Pendlebury and Sidebottom over the next few years, like the midfield, we need to get some new young guys in there as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Do you worry at all? And I don't, I'm not there to see everything that's going on that's discussed in the media and such. Eddie McGuire finally, made some comments that he thought that the footy media was kind of piling on, or really going after the Pies because of these moves. And Twitter kind of exploded about that, with people commenting, well, that's the same thing that Eddie does in his position in the media as well. That one of the things that I discuss with my students when we talk about the news media is that in many cases it tends to sensationalize things, kind of the concept of if it bleeds, it leads. So the uglier the story, it's going to get out there and it's going to make news.
That's
and that sort of thing. And seeing Collingwood, the club being in distress as it is right now is good media, is good television, it's good radio.
Oh, yeah.
Great thing to talk about.
It gets clicks, and that's what they're after.
Well, let's be honest, that's one of the reasons why we're talking here right now, because you're the, like I said, the one Magpie supporter that I've run across that has looked at this and said, yes, I like these moves. I think in the long term it needed to be done, and I'm happy about it. Or I'm content, maybe not happy, but content with it. I understand it.
Yeah, totally. And, sure, I wished certain things went down differently. Like, I wish we got some better picks. But, I understand, that Collingwood's in the situation. I think that they really just wanted to try and be as quiet about it as they can, because it's quite a sensitive issue. Just the fact of trading out players that are under contract, but then some of the sensitive issues in relation to Treloar as well. I think it's a little unfair on him, the way the media's gone about the whole thing, and then Collingwood's tried to sort of take a step back from it all, which I thought was fantastic, because I get sick and tired of coming into trade period, you don't want to go and let anything out, and I don't get how the media sort of they feel like they're entitled or they expect Collingwood to answer all their questions about things. It's like, no, that's not the way it works. And I thought it was actually great that we were actually keeping our mouths shut. But unfortunately, this year, with what's sort of gone down, the media's just become like vultures and made a situation into like, you look at North Melbourne, right? Well, they've just gone and sacked their coach. They've just gone and had for 1 year, mid-contract.
That's true.
There wasn't much said about it, really, but in Collingwood goes and, sacks or, trades off a few players, then it's like the whole, the sky's falling down, It's pretty crazy how the media's jumped onto it so full on. And so I agree with Eddie, that I haven't heard what he said today, but
does it,
going by what you said, yeah.
Does it, he stated, it was on the Fox Footy site, he said that, he believes the club's trade period isn't as bad as it had been viewed externally, suggesting the media is trying to come after them for not speaking publicly for much of its duration. Which, it's, I watched the interview that Ned Guy did on Fox Footy pretty much immediately after the trade period ended, and that was a very interesting
discussion. Hard to watch.
Yeah, it was hard to watch, because he was, because he didn't want to come right out and say, yeah, we had to dump salary, things happened, and and I think ultimately deep down, even though there were things that were said about Adam Treloar, I'm sure that the feelings that they have about him as a person probably mirror what you were saying very closely.
Yeah, without a doubt. But it's a business, you know. You got to make these tough calls and you not let the emotions take over. And it makes me wonder whether the Beams, him coming over, whether they let the emotions. Well, at the time, I guess, you know, everyone sort of thought it was a pretty good move, you know. And in hindsight, it's always a good thing. But you know, like, at the time, it was looked upon as a good move. But I think, you know, Collingwood's a bit, you know, once bitten, twice shy now. You know, there's a few, you know, I don't really want to get into Treloar's anxiety sort of issues, because I think that's pretty personal.
Yeah, that could be. If I became, you know, I'm a cat supporter, so I did not take offense when you said you didn't like the Cats. I'm okay with that. But you know,
mainly because you guys beat us in the grand final.
Well, you know, I listened to an interview that Adam Treloar did with Narrowly Meadows on her podcast, and it's called Ordinarily Speaking, and I think it's a wonderful podcast where she goes in and does, you know, like a real deep dive into the, not just the player, the person as a player, but the person as a person. And I became, even though he played for the Magpies, now for the Bulldogs, I became a Treloar supporter because of this conversation that he had with her and the things that he has had to deal with in his young life. And it was just, you know, it was great to see that, or to hear the positivity that was coming out of him. And this was early last year that this was recorded. You know, if you haven't heard that, I strongly encourage checking it out. It was a great discussion that she had with him.
Yeah, definitely. But that's Treloar. You know, he's so open. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He's honest. He's a great bloke. You know, and that's why all Collingwood supporters love him. You know, and that's why this is a really tough one. You know, but in the end, you know, like, there's a lot of other players out there that we can get that are like Treloar, and as far as being able to just put ourselves in a position where we can go and improve, you know, I guess the club's looked at this year and just gone, can this side go and win a premiership? You know, like, and I think that at the end of the year, they've just gone, listen, we need to make some changes now, like. And so that's what they've just gone to chose to go and do. And I think if we got a bit more in the trades back, I don't think there would have been as much backlash. But having said that, I hope that we can go and get a high draft pick this year. And, you know, if we can pull off one of the, you know, either McDonald or Phillips, or, you know, there's quite a few good players. I mean, and Collingwood obviously really rates this draft anyway, you know. So I think that, you know, we're looking good for the future. We've got Dacos coming in next year as well, who's going to be an absolute gun by the sounds of it. And in the midfield as well, you know, so Pendles and Sidebottom, when they eventually retire, you know, we'll have him and coming through the ranks. And I think it's actually really exciting, you know, like Stevenson as well. He was one of my favourite players, you know, like you know, it's sad, but that's just footy, you know. I look at the NBA over America, you know, and the way it's done over there, a lot of the players just get traded without even, you know, knowing, and then they're just boom, shipped off to another city in the country, and that's where they just got to go. There's no say at all in it.
Exactly, that's true. Yeah. Do you worry though? You know, and I was just wondering. Just a couple things I wanted to touch on. Do you worry about the impact that this series of events with Adam Treloar and with Jaden Stevenson, do you worry about the impact that that's going to have on them to be able to bring in free agents who may be concerned about, you know, okay, if I sign up, you know, a 4-year contract with the Pies and I'm planning on being here, that they may be trying to ship me out after a year or two. Do you worry about that?
Yeah. I better not, you know, like backload my contract, eh?
Yeah, well, they have to, from everything I've read, they have to, you know, whatever the numbers are, they have to get paid that wherever they go. Yeah. But I guess the team taking, like, for example, the Bulldogs, I guess, have the opportunity to restructure when those dollars are going to get paid. They may end up front loading the contract at this point in time and giving him more money up front and less at the end, kind of a thing, if they chose to do that.
Yep. But to answer your question, I don't have any real concerns about that. I think that when you think logically about it, I think that it's a move that we had to make. All clubs go and do it. They you just got to make some tough calls sometimes, and whether they're contracted or not. Like, you see players doing it all the time, like for whatever reasons. And I've heard your other podcast before where you're talking about in Australia compared to America, like, you rarely hear about players in America that want to go back to their home cities, and
right.
Whereas over here in Australia, it happens quite regularly, and it's amazing how players seem to do it all the time, but yet when a club goes to do it, it's really frowned upon. Whereas in the States, it seems to be the other way around.
Yeah, that's true. It tends to be a bit more of a unique situation when it happens in the AFL.
Yeah. But I think the AFL is also in a situation where it's a very traditional, there's a lot of tradition that's in AFL that they want to try and keep there. And loyalty is one of those things, as far as clubs goes. And, like, players would stick with clubs their whole careers. And it's slowly been changing over the years to the point now where a lot of players really have a lot more power to do whatever they want. So, I do recall hearing an interview once where I think it might have been Collingwood, where they were saying, it might have been amongst all this trade stuff, where they said that they would love to be able to go and just have everyone on 1-year contracts, and you could just review everyone every year and adjust it that way. But that probably will never happen, But unfortunately, some players, they just, it doesn't work out for them, and they got to move on. And as far as Stevenson goes, I think this will probably be a good thing for him. Like, he's a good player. There's something going on behind the scenes, I think. I've heard rumours about his training regime's not that good. So who knows what the whole deal is really. But sometimes just a move is a kick up the backside that a player needs. And
That's true.
Yeah, so I just think that as far as Collingwood goes, I'm really happy that we're going to be active in this draft. It looks like a good one. I've always gone to the actual drafts myself when they used to come up on the Gold Coast. I went to them all up here, and you'd sit there for a few hours and hear them just pick number one. And
right.
So I love researching all the new players and that are coming through, and it's really exciting for me. This
year had to be a little bit more difficult to do that with as little footy getting played as there has been.
That's right. It'll be interesting. We've got an academy player coming through, McInnes, and like earlier reports were, mid first round pick, but he hasn't really had a chance to play this year. So he could possibly drop down to the second round, which I'm hoping. But
right.
Yeah, it's a very, very unique year. There's a lot of players out there that they haven't really got a chance to sort of see. But having said that, scouts that check out all these players, they go and watch them for years. So
that's true.
They see their progress over the years. Last year, they would have already had their list of where they thought the whole draft was going to go, and it won't change too much, from last year's one. I wouldn't think anyway.
Okay, so one last thing before before we wrap this up here, when the Roos and when the Bulldogs come to the MCG to play the Pies next year, and there's 90,000 people in the stands because you guys are going to have COVID taken care of, and everybody's going to be allowed back in the stands. Positive thoughts there. How are Jaden Stevenson and Adam Treloar going to be received? Will they get cheered when they touch the ball? Do you think? I
think they will. You'll have some idiots out there that'll go and boo. You always do. But I'm not one to do that really. Well, actually, I did do it once when Daisy went to Carlton. I couldn't stand that. I had to let him know. But Yeah, like, I think they're respected. Well, particularly Trelawy's a respected player. I think you'll probably find a lot of people actually applaud him. So.
Yeah, I was
having
wondering.
Said that, you'll always find some idiots out there that'll boo and jeer at whatever they can.
Yeah, I was wondering that simply because that they left not under their own. It wasn't their decision to head out, so that's why I was I was wondering whether or not the supporters would be supportive of them, knowing that they didn't make the decision to leave the club. The club made the decision to have them leave.
That's right, and I honestly do think that based on that, it's not like it's a daisy that's gone. I'm taking off and leaving and going to the enemy as well. Having said that,
right.
So I don't think there'll be too many hard feelings. I think there's a lot of people that are upset, but slowly I'm seeing more and more people sort of go, you know what, shit happens sometimes. Let's as much as I don't think it's shit, I actually think it's a thing, and. Mind you, a lot of my friends just say, geez, you always just see the positive in everything. But that's just the way I sort of live. And I try and look at the whole situation here from a logical point of view and just, I understand what the Pies have done, and having said that, like there's, like how did we get into this situation? Should we have really got into this situation? With Beans, that's another question, but I'm really looking forward to it all anyway, mate. I think that I can't wait for the draft to come through, and then next year, and then even the year after that as well. I think it's going to be great in 2022 as well with Dacos and if we get McDonald, it could be his first year playing. He might even play some games next year if we get him too, and it'll be very, very interesting because we need a bit more up forward, and so I think we'll see something a bit different next year anyway, regardless. So it's going to be exciting times, mate. I'm really looking forward to it.
Well, I want to thank Sharn Sawers for coming on. Sean, you had some great insight. Your positivity in terms of where the Pies are going to be heading here in the future was terrific to hear. If you're a Pies supporter, you might want to latch on to his philosophy about this instead of a lot of the doom and gloom that a lot of people seem to be having. So, Sharn, thanks so very much for coming on this afternoon. I appreciate it.
No worries, mate.
Thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank my guests, Michael Livingston and Sharn Sawers, for reaching out and joining me on the podcast to talk about their club's trade period. Gentlemen, thanks so very much. Enjoyed the conversation. I hope you had a good time as well. It was a lot of fun here from this end. And again, thanks so very much for taking time out of your days to stop by and chat. Truly appreciate it. Don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to sign up for the mailing list, you get the episode delivered to you before anybody else. There's a short form in the show notes. Just click on the Google Doc and answer the questions, and I will get you added to the list. Also, if you're interested in possibly becoming a guest on the podcast to talk about your club's trade period or looking at things in an upcoming episode, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at @yank_on or send me an email at yankonthefooty@gmail.com. You can also find the podcast page on Facebook as well. I'm still hoping to talk with supporters of several clubs. I've put out a couple of additional tweets today mentioning that. Hopefully you'll reach out. I'd love to talk to you. If you're a supporter of the Dockers or the Eagles or the Giants or the Tigers or the Crows or Suns or the Saints or the Roos or the Hawks or the Demons or even the Bulldogs, I'd love to talk to you. I've talked to 7 clubs already. Now, don't forget that while you can find all the episodes of this podcast at yankonthefooty.podbean.com, you can also find it on your favorite podcast provider as well. And now that you've listened, I'd love it if you'd consider giving me a review on Apple Podcasts. It lets me know what I need to work on, what you like, and what could be improved upon. And don't forget that you can reach me again at yankonthefooty@gmail.com and on Twitter at yank_on, as well as on Facebook and Instagram at @yankonthefooty. Before I wrap up, I'd like to thank Mr. Joseph McDade for the use of 2 of his great pieces of music. Mr. McDade has created some fantastic music. I'm using the pieces Elevation and Backplate. You can find his music at josephmcdade.com/music. He's also on Spotify. You can also find the podcast on YouTube. If you search out my name, Craig Wessels, I have every episode loaded up there. It's just the audio version. It's just a static image. So if you choose to go that route, you can certainly find it there. Again, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you so very much for listening, and I ask that you consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. And ladies and gentlemen, may your dribble kick never hit the post. I'll catch you later. This has been episode number 60 of A Yank on the Footy. Don't forget that you can reach me at yank_on Twitter or to yankonthefooty@gmail.com. And you can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook at A Yank on the Footy. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for listening, and please consider sharing the podcast with your friends and family. And until next time, goodbye.